Welcome to this edition of the Capital Brief. I'm Seth Berenzweig here in our BLC Digital Media Studios in Tysons, and I am here joined once again by John Tamny, an author at Forbes and national author, and one of his new books, of which we'll be talking about in a moment. John, how you doing today?
I'm great.
Fantastic. So, John, we're going to be talking today about a topic that we've kind of touched upon and danced around quite a lot over the past few months, but I want to feature it as it relates to a really interesting book that is just coming out. The Money Confusion: How Illiteracy About Currencies and Inflation Sets the Stage for the Crypto Revolution. John, congratulations on the new book.
It is a great book. Oh, yeah, it's by me. Yeah,
Yes,
it's a great book.
It's
Yes.
written by a guy
Really?
named John Tamny.
Really? Wow.
I was going to say you do bear a remarkable resemblance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So John, this is something that we've touched upon, but I really just want to go through it because money is in one way a very fundamental means of capital transfer, be it either whether you want to go to Starbucks and get a coffee that has 7 names to it that I don't understand, or whether you're closing an M&A deal. So it's the allocation and transfer of capital that we're so familiar with, but yet at the same time, when we turn on CNBC and listen to any aspect of financial news, money also becomes kind of this theoretical cauldron surrounded by board governors with mystical hats and wands that are just creating all kinds of esoteric policies where they supposedly have certain kinds of powers to be able to do this, that, and the other thing with regard to rates and money supply and so forth. So can you tell me and tell our listeners what is the thesis of the book and why is it called The Money Confusion?
Well, it's the money confusion for all the things that you say. Economists, as they so often do, have turned what is first grade into an AP calculus problem. There's nothing complicated about money. Wherever there is production, money always emerges and has always emerged. And why is that? Because no one's working for money. No one borrows money. No one lends it. No one takes money. We take goods and services. We create goods and services, and we want something in return. Money is this agreement about value that always reveals itself in any society simply because we want to get in return for what we've produced, and barter doesn't work.
Well, but what about this theory that we listen to on a daily, if not an hourly basis, that the reason why the Fed has to raise interest rates is because they need to be able to discourage people from greater extensions of credit, which essentially increase the monetary supply, and under the assumed definition that inflation is more dollars chasing fewer goods, that somehow they can just wave a magic wand and that they can have money control. I mean, that's an assumption that a lot of us are listening to and getting pounded on top of the head all the time. Why is that not correct, and how does that lead to incorrect thinking?
It's utter nonsense that assumes markets are incredibly stupid. Because think about, why do you borrow money? You borrow money because you want to get things for it. Mm-hmm. And so the idea that anyone would go into the market and pay an interest rate for money that's not exchangeable for real resources presumes stupidity in society on a level that's staggering. You don't need intervention in what's natural. People produce things, and their excess is something that they lend out to others. Money is just the measure that we use to move goods and services to their highest use. It's the way that we store wealth so that we can get things in the future. The idea that we need government to intervene in what is natural is not just insulting, but it's dangerous, because money is as natural as the goods and services that it moves around.
But what's revolutionary about the point that you're talking about and so intriguing is that the reason why we have conversations on a daily basis about gas prices and about food prices and the fact that the market is getting obliterated because the stock market doesn't like what Powell is saying, it sounds like what you're doing is you're challenging some of the core fundamental concepts of economic theory that's based upon things that really affect us on a day-to-day basis. So how should we as the consumer, look at this in terms of making an adjustment to our thought process and how we manage our own money?
Well, we should look at it as with money, money itself is utterly meaningless, but money as a measure is very meaningful. Do you spend a lot of time thinking about how many inches are in a foot or how many ounces are in a pound? Probably not. Those are standard. And so historically, that's all that money was. As Adam Smith, and it's the opening line of The Money Confusion, he wrote very just as a throwaway line, quote, "The sole use of money is to circulate consumable goods." All money is just a measure that we use. It's something that's created in the marketplace. This is not me putting on my free market hat. It's just me putting on my historical hat. Money was a natural creation of production.
So then what are the bureaucrats in Washington doing wrong? They're turning a lot of things upside down. It seems like the approach in Washington is that we have to destroy the economy in order to save it, that we have to obliterate the stock market in order to be able to have a final supposed recapitulation, final leg down, so that we can all get depressed looking at our retirement accounts before we can get the all clear. So if Washington is doing things that are confusing, esoteric, and really not directly relevant, what, if anything, should be happening in Washington right now to deal with what really seems, I like the word confusion because it seems to me that that's a pollutant in Washington right now, and that spreads outwards. So what should they be doing?
Well, let's start with the idea. In Washington, and economists broadly believe that economic growth causes prices to rise, when in fact, economic growth by its very name is a sign of falling prices. Because what is economic growth? It's just an expansion of the division of labor. Growth is born of productivity, and we get more productive the more that we're dividing things up, that we're basically specializing in smaller and smaller ways. It used to be that an automobile cost was rarer than millionaires. And why? Because automobiles took forever to make. Henry Ford's genius was that if you divided up the work among hundreds and thousands of people, you could make cheap what was formerly expensive. Money is the lubricant that makes that possible. If we can divide up work, we can be more productive, and the price of everything falls. And so what should Washington be doing? It should not be doing anything, because this is just as it's natural for entrepreneurs to innovate, so is it natural for there to be a money to move the production of entrepreneurs around. This book ultimately argues that private money is going to replace the money of governments for all the reasons that you say.
And we'll absolutely be getting into crypto shortly. I definitely want to touch about that. But let's talk about your example with regard to the automobile, because if Washington had its way under the current manner of thinking, if the expensiveness and the lack of ready access to the automobile was something that the government can fix rather than the free market and corporate America fixing it, then you would just have a bunch of wizards sitting around a table pontificating and doing all kinds of financial theory to try to address the issue and try to inject themselves into the market. What your example is demonstrating is that the corporate America came up with a way of a means of production to be able to bring the product to the consumer in a way that not only revolutionized the automobile industry, but also revolutionized travel, transportation, roadway infrastructure in the United States. So we're talking there, of course, about Henry Ford. Can you give a current example today of a well-known entrepreneur that you believe gets it when it comes to avoiding the money confusion, and what leads you to that conclusion?
Well, the book's concluding chapter touches on Elon Musk fairly substantially. He's always said money is just an information system, which is absolutely right. Money itself tells you nothing in the way that a foot ruler tells you nothing. But used to measure things, a foot ruler tells you a lot, just as a stopwatch does. Musk's point is that money tells us things. It's a way to keep score. It's a way to measure our productivity. And it's a way for us to divide up work. If we can all agree that, say, the dollar is what we're going to use as we make the parts that go into creating a car or an office building, we can all focus on what we do best and exchange our work with money. And so I think we're seeing the one of the things that capitalism hasn't fixed yet is money. And this is important because think about what governments have done to money through over the millennia. Every single time, every government in the history of mankind, when it's gotten involved with money, it's clipped it. It's shrunk its value. What does capitalism do? It removes unease from our lives. It removes barriers. Removes barriers, but it also removes what's harming us. Devaluation, inflation, that is what inflation is the process whereby we have taken from us the fruits of our labor.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to cut off your sentence.
No, but so is it any surprise this book's assertion that gradually capitalists are going to take away the ability of governments to basically inflate away the value of our work?
One of the things that's so intriguing about your book and what you're saying is that it really kind of wakes up the thought process in terms of looking at the entire scenario from a market standpoint. So, for example, let's think about ways that we can compare two guys that have probably virtually never been compared until this very moment here in the studio, Henry Ford and Elon Musk. Henry Ford looks at a solution, and only the privileged few, ultra-rich can get cars. Henry Ford comes up with the Model T. He changes the world. And there are some personal points of criticism with Henry Ford that are irrelevant to this conversation, but he was an entrepreneur and an innovator, and then he opened that up. Fast forward to Elon Musk. He has completely changed the space travel industry. He has completely changed the mode of travel and the delivery of satellites that help communications, that help our lives, that have changed the battlefield in Ukraine. So what he has done is he has completely remodeled how to think about flight and how to be able to help companies launch their initiatives, launch their satellites. AST Communications, which is a satellite company, has launched Blue Walker 3. And this is a satellite which is the first of its kind that is out in outer space. And within a couple of days, if the unfurling is successful, it's going to revolutionize communication to anyone who has a cell phone in a poor reception area. They were going to launch with Russia. They changed their mind and they launched with Elon Musk, with SpaceX. And they made that shift just in the nick of time for obvious reasons. Now you have not only better space travel and better communications because of SpaceX, thanks Elon Musk, but also new cell phone connectivity and technology that's going to be used for emergency services, business communications, and also helping the stakeholders of AST acquire more wealth. So it seems to me that your thesis is really helping on both sides of that. But let's jump ahead to private money. When you talk about what is private money, what are you referring to there, and what is that going to be in terms of an impact on the future and the present?
Well, it's a good question because I think a lot of people will see the crypto line in the book's title, the subhead.
The stage for the crypto revolution.
It's about Ethereum, different coins. It's
right.
Really not. This is, at risk of sounding pretentious, a meditation on money, about money as this natural market consequence throughout history. And what do we know about money throughout history is that governments have always devalued it anywhere they've been, anywhere in the world.
If there's a way to screw it up, they'll find a way to screw it up.
Yeah, and some will say that's just me giving one of my libertarian rants. It's not even that. It's what's happened.
Right.
They've always devalued money. And in so doing, they've destabilized society. I mean, can you see why? You work for money, but what you're working for is what money can be exchanged for, only to see the fruits of your work be eviscerated.
Right.
And so is it any surprise that private money would reveal itself?
Sure.
Now, I'm of the view that the crypto revolution of the present is basically, again, a bunch of overthinking economist types making an AP calculus problem out of a first grade problem. A capitalist system that can put a supercomputer in my pocket can easily create credible money that people will say, they'll walk into a store and say, do you take Amazon dollars? Do you take JP Morgan dollars?
Sure.
Do you take Twitter dollars? They can create the measure, at which point we're off to the races because Would you rather earn what has historically been devalued, or would you rather be paid what's not going to be devalued? Whom do you trust to protect your wealth more, the private sector or governments?
Yeah, absolutely. And the whole crypto ecosystem creates so many other related opportunities in terms of blockchain, and blockchain's already had a direct impact in terms of many other aspects of the economy. The thing that I find so fascinating, and you and I have had this debate to a very limited extent in the past, is how slow our government is to and really how archaic their reaction is with regard to cryptocurrency. So of course we have the Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warrens of Capitol Hill coming in saying, we look at crypto as something that needs to get a sledgehammer on top of it because it needs to be regulated, it needs to be restricted, it needs to be controlled. And while I understand that digital dollars, USDC, United States digital coin, and things like that need to be able to have some kind of a reliability standard, there are other countries such as China that are working with digital yuan that arguably are far ahead of us. How would you compare where we are in the United States to other countries, other parts of the world as it relates to the crypto revolution?
Oh, it's hard to say. Certainly in China, they're far ahead of us just private sector-wise in terms of lending. I mean, what Jack Ma has done, where you can literally go online and get a loan within seconds, is quite something. And so they're way ahead of us in some ways like that.
Jack Ma, by the way, apparently had an involuntary vacation for a couple of months.
Yeah, no.
And then he popped back up again, and he seemed to be much more polite to President Xi.
These things happen.
Yeah,
and
it happens.
It's so interesting that Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders say, well, we've got a sledgehammer this and everything. The arrogance of that when you think about it, because where's all the calls for going after the U.S. Treasury and its mismanagement of the dollar over the decades that has directly ripped off dollar holders, not just in the U.S. but around the world. And so I hear you about government being involved, but remember, government is always constrained by the known. Where crypto or private money, I prefer to call it private money, will take us.
That's exactly what it
is in directions that government can't comprehend, because let's face it, most economists who staff government believe that this is something that needs to be managed.
Yes.
No. Money, that's like saying that the Soviets had a good idea with 5-year plans. Just as you can't plan production, you can't possibly plan money. And I think the government's conceit on that means that basically capitalism is yet again going to outrun it on the way to private money becoming the norm, but in ways that surprise us and in ways that the government will be too late to actually stop in the first place.
I'm always fascinated to see how our friends on Capitol Hill never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. They have some of these hearings. Several of the hearings have actually been pretty informative, and they have had some hearings on cryptocurrency and blockchain technology that have been informative, that have been helpful, that have had really quality witnesses that have come in and helped to set the stage. But unfortunately, it really kind of goes in one ear and out the other. And a lot of the people who are having these conversations, who are behind the big mics, the politicians, are really just seeing this more as a chance to be able to just laud their platitudes, and watching some of the congressmen and congresswomen banging the table on Jamie Dimon and all the others, because they would rather try to get into an argument than learn a point. Unfortunately, the old saying goes, sometimes the most important sense that you have is the ability to listen. People on Capitol Hill, as we know, don't tend to be the best listeners. But in conclusion, when you look ahead and you see private money that is, it's a relatively new industry. It's something that I agree with you is going to be genuine. Like any other new industry, you have to cut through the chaff. You have to understand that, the future, in my humble opinion, is not going to be the Dogecoins of the world. But blockchain and Ethereum is real. Smart contracts are real. Where do you see the next tangible gain in the blockchain / crypto world in terms of how to be able to have a new layer of private money and private finance that's going to make it a step forward, not only in terms of sophistication, but in terms of security, because a lot of people are really getting whipsawed right now. They're seeing the value of their dollars go down. They're seeing the value of their retirement accounts plummet. Where do you see that headed over the next couple of years?
Well, I'm sure it's actually already happening. I just don't know it. This book, in the beginning and the end, makes a case that the collapse in crypto is the surest sign of its staying power.
And how do you mean that?
Because if you look back to 2000, 2001, the internet bust, oh wow, the internet's over with. No, that was a beautiful signal of the end of a growth spasm. All this investment, most of the companies didn't make sense, good, and so the markets pushed out what didn't make sense. And the few that made sense, that transformed our lives, did. I think we're seeing the same here. My speculation is that Bitcoin is going to be the netscape of this revolution. That we're seeing basically markets push out the bad, that we're finally, instead of it being a fear of missing out where everything goes up, we're seeing actually a lot of the bad ideas be pushed away. And from that, we're going to learn how to use this. My guess is that you and I will not be the teachers. I think young people who grew up with technology, who never knew a time of basically paying bills by mail, are going to be the ones who teach us how to use private money. And it's going to be beautiful.
Well, it's amazing, and one of the things that I think is really exciting is a learning opportunity to be able to read. And again, I think this is an important book for us to think about. The money confusion, and I hope you don't get angry with me for holding it up one more time. I know that you tend to be a pretty modest guy, but we all have a lot to learn on this topic when it comes to how to run business, how to be able to understand how the cryptocurrency environment is blending in. If you take a look at the CEO of MicroStrategy, who went all in for a big chunk of his, it's Michael Saylor, I believe, went in with a big chunk of his corporate treasury, and he went all in on Bitcoin. And my thought on that is good for you, but why are you just riding one pony? And you know, he may come out on the other end and prove himself to be a genius. But I think that in terms of the general direction of where he's headed, in terms of at least having an open mind, I understand why he did it. I think he needed to diversify a little bit more in things that are a little bit more tangible in terms of how it can really have an immediate use proposition. And in my view, I think Ethereum is a more productive path. But anyway, this is really, it's not only really interesting, but it's really important, and it really is something that we need to think about. So John, thanks so much, and good luck with the book.
Thank you. Thanks for doing it.
You bet.